Hello everyone, we are back with the Hit Me With Your Best Pint podcast. This week we were at Bell Tower Brewing Company, joined by Jennifer and Karl, and we had a really great time with the show this week. It went a little longer than normal, but I feel like it's a really good listen. Thanks for sitting through my oldest guitar intro, and here we go. Hello everyone, we're back here with the Hit Me With Your Best Pint podcast. I'm at Bell Tower Brewing today with Jennifer Herman and Karl Walter. We're going to talk about a few beers here. We're starting with Session Saison. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer and Karl.
Howdy.
Howdy. How's everybody doing? We were having an interesting conversation prior to this, maybe a gripe session. I'm not sure how else to describe it.
State of the working day.
State of the working day, state of the industry, just all the normal complaints that...
Proper conditioning.
Yeah, proper conditioning was the big one. And I don't know, you guys, we want to start talking about that a little bit, because we were enjoying a delicious Pilsner in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And kind of got off on that tangent a bit.
We could probably get off on it again, so I think we should go straight into Saison.
All right. So what do we have in the glass here is our first beer we want to talk about.
All right, and this was actually the first beer in the tank. Saison du Clocher is what it's called now, and that is French for Spirit of the Bell Tower. It's 5% and 12 IBUs. I think it drinks like you would want a Session Saison to drink. Like this, I feel like you could drink all day long.
Yes.
Easy, but it's not... It's got some nice fruitiness and some nice, we call them phenolics, which I just think gives it a little bit of edge to make it different than a Pilsner, to make it different than a Kolsch, to make it different than some of your other easier drinking styles of beer. The thing I love the most about Saisons is, to be a proper Saison, they have to be well attenuated.
Yes.
So if they don't finish under one Plato, then you did something wrong and you pushed it. So if we can talk about conditioning, Saison is one of those, like, it still is going to take 4 weeks. Like, just because it's an ale doesn't mean that it's going to be cleared and ready to be drunk after 4 weeks or after 3 weeks. Just because it looks good doesn't mean that it's going to taste good too. But I think that this one is super well attenuated. We used a French Saison yeast, Saaz hops, and rustic Pilsner malt. So I'm a huge fan of rustic. I use this Pilsner malt as our base malt for most of our beers. And I'm still an old school Saaz lover. Yes. So I just don't think that there's anything better than a Saaz mixed with the fruitiness of this yeast. Having said that, the Pilsner is also Saaz. But the Pilsner is so clean and crisp that you really get more of an idea of what Saaz can do in a beer compared to what it does in a Saison, because you don't have a yeast character really in a Pilsner the same way that you do in a.
And that's kind of why
Saison.
I love beers like Saison and something like this that's super crushable. Just that fermentation character is so pronounced, and it keeps it interesting, even though it's a beer that's highly refreshing and it's finished dry, and you still pick up like that, you get a little bit of the Pilsner malt character, you still get some of that Saaz, but that fermentation character just kind of keeps it so you want to keep coming back for another sip, because it's so interesting, and you're picking out, those notes of, maybe there's some peppercorn there, maybe there's a little bit of clove, or maybe there's any of these like phenolic characters that really shine through on something that's traditionally hot fermented like a Saison, and a yeast that just produces just this rainbow of character that most clean yeasts you're just not going to get. Things like Pilsner, or even like English mild, those sorts of things, where it's like most of what you're getting is from the other ingredients in the beer and not really the yeast. That's why these beers are always so interesting and enjoyable to me, is because of just that fermentation character. And I love, even in the brew house, making these beers because it's just so wild
right.
of a process.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, it's just raging at like 85 degrees and it's going. And, fermentation is going to finish up, relatively quickly a lot of the time, but then just the amount of time it takes for that yeast to do the rest of its job of cleaning up things you don't want remaining in that beer. And having the patience to do that side of it as well and turn something out like this that's, very clean, very bright, very dry and just quaffable and,
all the things that you want.
Yes.
All the things you want. I have two things to say about the way that I ferment this beer. So I don't start off hot. I start off colder than I started at 64. And I don't even slowly ramp it up until it's 50% done. And then I slowly ramp it up. I get nervous about 85 degrees. I worked in another brewery where a lot of their fermentation profiles, they weren't finishing. And they also used an extreme amount of sugar to help finish that out. And I think that kind of scared me with 25% sugar and 90-degree fermentation. Really doesn't make a enjoyable beer.
Well, that's maybe I was
no, I understand what you mean.
Because I don't start up high either
yes.
on these beers. I start at a normal, 68.
Yeah.
And I'll let it start chewing through early at
yes.
the cooler temps. And then as it's, getting through fermentation, I will definitely let it free rise a bit. And then, I'll cap it, a little bit above 80 so that I can drive a little more of that phenolic character towards the end. Yeah, I wouldn't want to start it early and let it rock that way. That can throw a lot of characteristics you don't necessarily want.
I think that unseasoned Saison brewers don't understand that you can burn your yeast out if you are starting too high.
Yeah.
So you have to let your yeast get acclimated to its environment before you can really push its limit. Right. Because if you do it the right way, then its limit is going to be at 0.5 Plato, and that's where you want the beer to be. So if you do take the time to not only manage that primary fermentation, then you're going to have a lot easier time in your secondary fermentation, which is the conditioning portion, so you can actually get a nice, clean, crisp beer, not only in the mouthfeel and the taste, but also in the clarity. And I also will say, we were talking earlier about Saison and how Saison has, unfortunately, it got moved into the funky category pretty quickly because Saisons do mend very well with some of the wild yeasts. That wild yeast character is going to add a lot of cool, they talk about barnyard notes, which sounds really horrible, but it's actually very pleasant. But I think that the Saisons that don't have that character get a bad name. Because this is what the field drinkers were drinking, and this is actually 1.5 points above what they were drinking in the field.
Yeah.
I
think modern Saison, as far as we understand them, especially in America, is a separate. You would almost consider what the traditional Saisons were that they were drinking in the field more of just like table beer.
It was table beer, yeah. And not too much funky stuff going on. I mean, they were drinking it because it was better to drink that than it was to drink water. The nice thing about Saisons, and unfortunately the nice thing about Saisons, is they do go so well with a lot of different fruits and spices and herbs and other wild yeasts. But they don't necessarily need to have them. And especially, I think from my beer judge background, understanding that difference between what the wild yeast actually does in a clean, crisp beer like this is not unpleasant. It's really very refreshing, but it's not the traditional Saison.
Yeah, I always think too, and I'm sure a lot of people do, I'm sure you guys do as well, Saison DuPont for me is like the definition.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, I drink that beer and it's such a simple beer. And that's kind of how, when I was still brewing our Saison, I literally just was trying my best to make my impression of that beer, and if you don't know what that beer is, it's Pilsner malt and it's Kent Golding hops, and it's brewed on a direct fire system where they're just really driving some of that kettle caramelization, and then fermenting it with Saison yeast, and you just get such a beautifully complex flavor out of such humble ingredients and such a simple ingredient bill, and it always just blew my mind what that beer was, because I mean the things you can pick out of it are just tremendous. And so that was always kind of my goal when I was brewing Saison, was just keep it extremely simple. Ours was always boiled 2 to 3 hours, because we're on steam systems, so we can't quite drive that character, and just trying to get more and more character out of those simple ingredients, and then just let the fermentation kind of drive the rest of it.
Sorry.
It's always spread. I always have to be cognizant of how notifications come across on my phone while I'm recording, which I should go ahead and
just
reminds me to silence it so that that's not happening.
Well, that's what I love about the comparison between this Saison and the Pilsner, because they're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
There's Pilsner malt, there's acid malt, because my water is weird, and there's Saaz. Yeah. And it's really the yeast that is driving the differentiation point between the two beers.
Yeah, and when you taste them back to back, as we have here,
right,
vastly different.
Totally different.
In
totally
character.
Different. Yeah.
It's a world of difference between how these two beers taste. I would say their sort of crispness and level of refreshment is very similar, but as far as on the palate, it's vastly different, and that's what's always fun about different yeasts and different fermentations, and that's one of the reasons I love doing this and talking to other people about these styles, and is hopefully give people an appreciation for what the differences are and what they should be looking for,
right,
and how they should be enjoying these beers.
Right.
Well, and that's a note on Saison too. What I like about the style is how varied it is in the style.
Yeah. And
my introduction to the Saison was going to visit Jennifer as a home brewer in Cincinnati for the Beer and Sweat all keg homebrew competition. Middle of August, you're sweating, you're drinking, and I found Saison, and I out of probably 125 taps that they had, a good quarter to a third of them were Saison, and outside of Saison DuPont, I hadn't experienced much of the style.
Yeah,
and so then I'm going and trying all these, and it also had the proper conditioning, and some of them weren't quite what you hoped they would be. It's a homebrew competition, but some of them were just blowing my mind.
Yeah,
and the variety within the style, and they all are generally going with the same basic ingredients.
Yeah. Same basic ingredients, with the one thing that cannot ever change is it's got to be attenuated properly. It's got to be. If it's too sweet, it's not the right style, and it completely ruins the experience. I will say, I'm going to hitch back on about home brewing. Had I not been involved with the homebrew club that I was involved with in Cincinnati, the Bloterian Brewing League, and my introduction into the beer judge certification program, I probably would have been homebrewing for years and years before I would have come across a Saison. I don't think that I was brewing them when I was brewing in Kent before I moved to Cincinnati. And I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of old school brewers that had been brewing for 10, 15, 20 years. So they always had German lagers. They always had some sort of Belgian stuff. Some of these guys had cellars for days. And it opened my mind to what you could actually produce with 4 ingredients. And I think that's what strikes me about Pilsner and Saison, probably more so than a lot of these other beers, even if you take a porter that has the 4 ingredients, but you're still using a number of different dark malts. Yeah. So the dark malts, when you bring that in the story, it's just different because you've got 4 of them. Like this one is just Pilsner malt and acid malt, which is just Pilsner malt with some
Yeah.
some stuff.
And I was guilty of, I didn't have a great appreciation for a lot of lager styles. I didn't have a great appreciation for a lot of the continental European styles of beer when I was homebrewing, because at that time, when I was I was just like discovering craft beer when I started getting into homebrewing, and at that time it was all the rage was West Coast IPAs,
For sure.
Kind of like all those IPA variants, a lot of stouts and imperial stouts and that kind of stuff. So a lot of what I was brewing at home was, West Coast style IPAs.
And what you wanted to drink.
It was,
you were brewing what you wanted to drink. Yeah.
And so, I really,
we could all be
I
so
started
lucky.
getting a real appreciation for lagers, especially, and then a lot more appreciation for a lot of Belgian styles and those sorts of things. Kind of after I started professionally brewing, because then I was hanging out around with a lot of other brewers who were better traveled than I was, and were brewing these other beer styles that I didn't have a lot of exposure to, and just trying everything. And I think it's kind of the same if you're a chef in a restaurant, if you're brewing beer. I think it's imperative that you try just about everything everywhere you go, and get a real idea of what people are doing around different places. And that's kind of how my own understanding of beer got a little bit better, was just being around other brewers and those brewer meetings that you organized in the early days when we were going, that aren't quite there again anymore. But
we gotta work on it.
Yeah, everybody's so busy. It's so tough to get them
It
together.
is, but it would be
But
so
it was
fun.
so much
I think
fun.
We need to have impromptu meetings.
Yeah, I really enjoyed them in the old days when it was like, how many people were there? Like maybe 10, 15 people in the early days.
And they grew a little bit, and then it got to be so fun, and then it was really, really raging, and then COVID hit.
Yeah,
and they stopped.
exactly. And it's, but those things were important.
Yeah, they were super awesome.
Being able to go to other brewers' spots and that's kind of another reason I'm doing this podcast, is I've been so bad about getting around a lot of places, and it's giving me an excuse to do that again. But it is like, I'm constantly fascinated by what other brewers are doing, and because there's a lot of times where it's like, I don't really understand that thing that you're putting out here, but I want to know more about it, and I want to talk about it, I want to try it. And, I love doing that, because even if it's not something I enjoy particularly, just knowing about it and getting that taste profile and see what they're going for, and getting a bit of an education on it, so at least, I have a bigger understanding of what everybody's doing.
Yeah. I will say, Saisons are interesting. It's such a beautiful word. So it means season. Mm-hmm. Which to me says that Saisons are for every season. There's not just one season for Saison. I don't understand why the new beer drinker, it takes a little bit of education for them, and I think that's what kind of the summary is that we had to be educated to understand what Saisons were, to be able to brew a proper one, to get to where we wanted to have one that we enjoyed, that we could produce consistently. But the regular drinker that's coming in, first of all, they're looking at 16 taps. You have 16 taps, and they're drinking the hazy because it's recognizable. A lot of the beer styles, I'm not saying anything outside of what the Beer Judge Certification Program says, what the Brewers Association style guidelines say, but the regular drinker doesn't know what these style guidelines are. So they see Saison, it's a French word, it's the style of the beer, why am I going to drink that? We all could be as smart as John McWherty and brew a Saison and not call it Saison.
Yeah.
So he brews a Belgian wheat beer, and it's fucking good.
Yeah, it's delicious.
And it sells because he didn't call it Saison.
Right. Yeah, and that's,
But how can I call this? I can't call this a wheat. I don't have wheat in this.
No. Well,
and maybe it doesn't matter. But what am I going to call it? A funky Pilsner? Nobody's going to drink that because...
Or like French session ale, or,
right.
It's hard to market it, especially...
But it shouldn't be a hard sell, and that's the interesting thing, is that every single brewer out there Top 3 beers you want to drink after you get off work: Pilsner, Saison, what? Pale ale?
Helles, pale ale.
Hellas?
Yeah.
Something.
Right.
Something that's not a hazy. Something that's not a fruit milkshake thing.
Yeah.
We just want an easy drinking beer, something that you don't have to think about what you're tasting.
Yeah.
Like, beer is complicated. Enjoying it shouldn't be.
Right.
At the end of the day, you don't want to judge beer. You just want to have something that's refreshing.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I find myself, while I do drink a good portion of my own beer, I'm constantly, when I'm drinking my own beer, I'm not drinking it and thinking to myself, this is just a real nice beer that I'm having right now. It's
Right.
It's picking everything apart that's in that beer, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do the next time.
I know.
To change whatever it is I don't like.
But you do that when you go to Acronym or when you go to Brighton? I don't either. I'm just like,
Not at all.
I mean, if there is, it's like that first thought, like, I don't know if I would have done that. Or you think about it after you talk to the brewer, like, oh, well, I see where you're going with it.
Sure.
But that's not what I would have done.
Yeah, no, most of the time when I go to another brewery, I'm out of that headspace. Like, I'm not there
I'm just enjoying your work. I'm enjoying your
work.
work.
I want to come drink what somebody else has made.
Yeah.
It's that social time.
Yeah, I want to talk to them.
Yep.
Want to just hang out, like, enjoy it, chill, like, but with my own stuff, it's always a critical eye that never stops.
Yeah.
Like, it's always like, shit, this packaging
Right.
wasn't quite as solid as the last time. Is this a one-off can, or is this
See,
the
now
whole...
as a liquid artist, I really wonder about visual artists and acoustic artists. Like, when they sit around and they're drinking beer socially, are they talking to each other about picking apart their art? Like,
Probably, yeah.
I mean, I imagine that it's much of the same, but the difference is that we have, we are the lubricant.
Yeah.
Like,
I think anybody that produces anything that is open to public criticism,
they're talking about it. Artists are talking about it.
Sitting around doing the same thing we're doing right now,
Yeah.
picking apart their own.
Do they have an Untapped?
Boy, I hope
Imagine,
not.
right.
How fucked would the art world be if they
Can we
had
talk about
Untapped?
Untapped for a minute?
Like, I really like modern impressionism, but this one was more expressionist, and I didn't fucking care for it. One paint swab for this one.
How do you feel about Untapped, Jake?
Oh boy, it can be a great source of entertainment.
Yes, that's just we can say that for sure.
It can also be a complete thorn in your side and really ruin your day. Even the thing is, you want to not look at that stuff, and a lot of times I don't. Every once in a while, if I have a new beer that I'm putting out, I will take a look, in the subsequent next couple of weeks to kind of see if there's any kind of feedback that I can use on it.
Yeah.
And it can be useful for that, but you have to really wade through the shit to get to any kind of feedback that's going to be useful, because most people that are Untapped are not looking at a beer objectively based on style, and you don't want to be mad at them for that, because they don't understand that that's not what they're
style, right?
They don't understand that that's not what irks us. They're looking at it overall as, do I like this beer or do I not like this beer? It's not like, do I like it for an IPA? Do I like it for whatever other style? It's just, do I like this beer or do I not like this beer?
And how many badges do I need to get? And it's
a collection
of badges,
thing.
so here we go.
I will say, I see way less Untapped activity these days than there was 4 or 5 years ago. I don't think it drives a lot of what's happening in the market anymore like it could have influenced a while ago.
Yeah, I think that before COVID, I think it was influencing.
Yeah.
And I think when it first came out, it was interesting because it made you want to go explore other places.
Yeah. Well, and it put in your pocket the ability to kind of see a whole lot of reviews on certain beers or something at once, where previous to that, there was Beer Advocate and Rate Beer and those sorts of things where you get on. I will say those were a little more hardcore beer nerd.
They were a little more regimented, yeah. Rate Beer didn't piss me off.
No, but Untapped just gave everybody the ability to come in and speak on beer, even if they had no practical knowledge of it. So on one hand, it did get people more involved and make them feel like they were part of, this industry or this culture. But on the other hand, just like any social media, it also empowered a lot of people that have no idea what they're talking about
to talk about it.
Be able to have, kind of an opinion that you had to deal with. Where before you could just kind of ignore people that didn't really understand what they were saying. Now it's like they, like anything else, they have a platform to say things that they're out of school on.
They have license.
Yeah.
And I think that for me personally, having been a home brewer that was heavily engaged in the homebrew community, entering beers and competitions and receiving feedback from, whether it was a novice judge or an experienced judge, I mean, I received harsh criticism, and the first couple of times that you get a 20 on a beer, it's like, oh God, it really
Sure.
cuts you.
Yeah.
And I don't think that judges mean to cut you like that, but
No.
until you've actually entered a competition and you receive comments back like that, you don't understand really how it cuts you. And these guys that are when you do say negative things like that on Untapped, it really does mostly reflect on their lack of knowledge about what they're actually judging. And they're using their preferences much more than their education, because their education is lacking. So they're going to tell you what they like and they don't like. So how do you judge a hazy when you don't like hazies?
Well, yeah, the thing is, that's it's always funny because everybody has those reviews where you get somebody that comes on and they're like, "Oh, this is a really great IPA, but I don't like IPA."
Yeah.
3 bottle caps.
2.5
or 3 bottle caps.
Yeah.
Because just it's a style you don't like, even though you're like, "This is the best one I've ever had." And then it's like, well,
but I've never scored a beer higher than 5. That's not a milkshake IPA.
But you thought it was, your opinion is so worthwhile that you still had to check into that beer, hurt that brewery's rating, and all because you just really need that. I would rather you just leave no review, no comment. If you got to check into a beer to up your tally, and it's something out of a style you don't have knowledge of, experience of, don't care for, it's best to just leave it alone.
Right.
And I said, with anything on the internet, you cannot control how people are interacting with it.
Right.
And while it's a thorn in all of our sides, I think it's also, like I said, can be a great source of entertainment sometimes.
It might, we might have to deal with it for another couple of years. Having said that, what is a redeeming quality is, or not quality, but the brew paths.
Yeah.
I think that is far more conducive for new drinkers, new beer seekers to get out and visit other breweries, visit other styles, see what other brewers are brewing. Not every brewer is the same. Brewers have very niche. They can have niches.
Yes.
And I think that hopefully these young drinkers that have been on Untapped for the past 5 or 7 years, now they know what they like.
Yeah.
And they have the breweries that they like to patronize because they're brewing beers that they now enjoy.
Yes.
And that I can only hope that that's what the brew tap is, or the brew paths are easier.
Yeah, the brew paths are great for getting people to go around and actually explore the breweries around them. I love the point that you got into about not every brewery having to be the same. I feel like there's a crazy trend in this industry, and I was on a Reddit thread not too long ago where I had made the mistake of commenting hey, what if I told you not every brewery has to be the same?
Ooh.
And people lit me up because it was ooh, well, you're just going to throw money away because what if somebody's coming with a group of their friends and they can't have gluten in their beer or whatever? It's cool. So what I'm trying to tell you is, do you have that same expectation that you're trying to put upon breweries when you go to a restaurant?
Right.
If you're going to a pizza place, do you expect to get Kung Pao chicken? Mm-hmm. If you're going to a French restaurant, you expect al pastor tacos. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the thing that I'm it's okay for breweries to have their own niche things. And maybe, one thing to look at is maybe it would be a little bit better if we kind of got back to reserving a couple of a guest tap model, where it's like, hey, even though I don't love hazy beers and it's not my forte, I'm not brewing them, we can put one from a neighboring friend on tap. And, even though I don't make it here, I can have it on offer for you. Or, but even then, you don't even have to do that.
No, you don't. Because didn't you start brewing an American Light Lager?
Yeah.
Our American Light Lager is one of our best sellers.
Yeah. It sells great.
I really don't want to have Busch Light on tap.
No, well, we can't. Is the thing is, like, where we're at, we're in a dry township, so the way our license works is we can only sell what we make on site. So we can't sell a Bud Light or a Busch Light or, whatever other major brand. Not that I would want to anyways.
And you don't want to brew 4 of them.
No.
So, and do you have a hazy on ever?
No.
Okay, you don't. I do.
Right.
But I learned how to brew them,
Sure.
and I'm happy to have one on. Am I mad that it sells better than some of these other styles that are more traditional? Kind of, sometimes every day. Right. But it's also comforting to know that we're brewing a solid hazy or juicy. But
that we're not known for.
That we're not known for.
Yeah.
But it's also not what we set out to do. That wasn't our niche.
Well,
the niche wasn't to fill everybody's gut with something that they absolutely wanted. It was to be the traditional brewer in town where you could come and get food or beer that actually pairs well with food.
Yeah.
Hazies don't pair with everything. You can't drink hazies with all kinds of food.
No.
Pilsner, yes. Saison, yes.
Sure.
Schwarzbier, yes.
Absolutely. And we're on
Did you see my soapbox?
Simpatico.
It grew. It grew. It's taller. Come on!
Well, that's, we're very, I think our philosophies on beer are very similar.
Yeah.
And that's, it's not, the thing is, like, I understand hazy is a thing that's here to stay, that's what a lot of people are into, that's what they like.
And I love brewing them. I absolutely love brewing them.
I don't care for them at all. I, can't get into them. I've tried a million hazies, and I've had some that I'm like, that's okay, but I couldn't drink more than half a glass of this before I'm, like, done with it. And it's just not something I'm passionate about. And the thing is, like, that strikes me as, like, why would you ever force a person or a place into doing, offering you something that they don't care about? You're not going to get a great example of that thing, whether it's a hazy IPA, whether it's a cheeseburger or whatever. Like, if I don't care about it, but I'm just slapping it together so that I can offer it to somebody because that's what they want, it's not going to be good. And I'm not in the business of doing not good or not great.
I think that the craft beer industry is really moved into a mass market where the individual that's actually crafting the art has been lost. This is an individual enterprise for myself. This is not, I did not start brewing beer professionally in my hometown to brew what you want to be a brew.
Well, that's my...
I am good at brewing what I like to brew, and I'm really good at talking about what I like to brew and getting you to actually understand the drink in your glass, to understand how I crafted this. This is my liquid art. I want to talk to you now about philosophy and life.
A brewery...
And sitting around and having a libation together.
A brewery should be the expression of the person brewing the beer.
Understood.
Is kind of the way I look at it.
And that's an old school thinking.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening when I look out at the younger generation. It's not the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same. I think that brewers and people in the industry do see that variety and the variation. That's not, I don't think they see commonality. We do see that you could give the same recipe to 6 different brewers, and somebody who's uneducated or not trained, doesn't have a refined palate, will go to each of those breweries and think that they're the same. But if you got those 6 guys together and they all tasted their beers, and girls, they're going to say, that's got to come from Jennifer. It's got that phenolic character and her Saison. I think that they do recognize the variety, the personality of the brewer, on top of the different equipment, the different water and the profiles, and how people deal with that or don't deal with that. Brewers that manage multiple yeast strains, or brewers that have a house yeast, and then they're going to have a commonality between all of their beers. If they're using that one yeast strain they know how to work it and they know how to use it and they make good beer with it, but they're not going to have that variety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was very careful when we first opened. We actually opened without an IPA of our own. And it was on purpose, not because I don't like IPAs, because I that's not the brewer that I wanted to be. I wanted to be the Belgian. I wanted to be the lager. I wanted to be the easy drinking American ale. I really wanted to hit that 5.5%, and really play around with what I grew up drinking and not what the 22-year-old wants to drink. I think that there's a couple of other brewers out there that share that same mentality. But having said that, I also have known a lot of brewers, younger brewers, that come into a market and take it over. They have their certain niche.
Sure.
I think Magic City is a great example.
Yeah.
Jay and Vince do an outstanding job at what they do.
For sure.
They're when I have people commenting that that's their favorite brewery and they come here, you don't have anything for me to drink. You're absolutely right. And that's why you choose to drink there. Right. I appreciate that you take the time to come out and, and take a look at what a traditionalist menu might look like.
Yeah.
But that is also the diversity that drives our industry.
Yeah.
Is that if we're all doing the same thing, it's not going to be sustainable.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I always like to point out to people, too, is, like, not everybody has to do everything for everyone. Not everybody is going to come to my brewery and enjoy what my offerings are. And that's fine.
And it is okay.
And the thing is like, if people come out, if I'm in the bar and they're like, oh, why don't you have a hazy IPA? Why don't you have a fruited sour?
Well, let me tell you why.
Well, it's not even, I don't even get into that.
Right.
Like, because I'm not going to tell you my preferences, because if that's what you're looking to drink,
let me tell you where to go.
But I will point you in the direction of my friends' breweries that are knocking it out of the park.
That's what
and
I
will
tell
say,
them
hey,
all the
if
time.
that's what you love, go see Magic City, go see Missing Mountain, go see these places that's their passion and that's what they're doing, and they're doing a fantastic job. And I am not at all going to be hurt.
No, not at all. Nope.
If that's what you're looking for and you want to go to those places, great. But I'm like, when you're ready for, something a little more traditional, something, clean and easy, or,
big and hoppy.
Older school, kind of.
Old school IPA.
Yeah, older school IPAs, or that kind of, like, come back and see me. I'll be here still. Been here 10 years. I'll still probably be here making beer. So come back and visit. But it's, I'm always like, we don't have to be everything to everybody. And I, hope that maybe the industry kind of figures that out in the next couple of years. And, those places that love those big, crazy, bold dessert, stouts are able to rock that and do their own thing. And they don't feel like they have to be pressured into moving other places in the same way that, more traditional brewers don't necessarily have to get into their space.
But I have seen some of the old school, more traditional brewers move into the new age realm.
Yeah.
And some of it really kind of bothers me, especially at first. So when I see a peanut buttered, barrel aged porter or whatever from Sierra Nevada, that it kind of makes my heart drop a little bit, because that's not really what I want to see come out of that brewery. Right. Is it probably a fantastic beer? I think it was Narwhal that they...
Narwhal, yeah. There was peanut butter Narwhal.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's really great because I'm a peanut butter closet enthusiast, but it still kind of is like, oh...
I kind of get that. I mean, you see a lot of that...
Stone happened way before. way before.
As
soon as I don't see Arrogant Bastard everywhere, I'm just like...
But it's also, I think that's a lot of a function of... Hey, at a certain time, what was it, probably around like 2012 to 2016, you had these larger breweries that moved into, expanding eastward or westward and opening new large facilities, and they have to try to maintain their production volumes in a ever shrinking space where, beer has become way more hyper-localized. And, a lot of those larger breweries are struggling to find relevance outside of their own markets. So I kind of understand why they kind of transition that way. beer is an odd business still.
It still
And
is, yeah.
It's certainly odd for those that have large facilities at this point where they were really banking on the popularity of more craft beer, and so they expanded and opened additional production facilities, and now they have all this production volume, but the demand's not the same as it was.
Business is weird. Let's not project that onto beer.
That's yeah, very true. Very true. Business in general, very weird. We'll run through a couple of questions here while we're finishing up this first Saison. You guys are here located in Kent. You're on
Park Avenue and Gosler Avenue. We're at the corner.
And you guys have been here since
October of 2021.
All right, yeah, right at the right time, right?
Right at the right time. It's perfect time.
And so we kind of tipped on, I know you got your start home brewing, you said in Cincinnati, and then you kind of moved into commercial brewing after that. I know you were at Market Garden for a little while. Did you have any other professional gigs?
Then I was at Rock Mill.
Rock Mill as well. Yeah, and that's Karl, I know you kind of got into homebrewing with Jennifer when she was back here in Kent.
Yep. Yeah, I started in the early 90s and then left town for a few years and came back. Jennifer was interested and I started brewing with her, and then she flew the coop and went down to Cincinnati, but God bless her, it's how we're here today.
Exactly.
She stayed here, we'd still be in the garage.
Probably.
All right, well, we're going to finish up this, the last of the Saison in our glasses, and then we're going to move to another beer to talk about. We're going to put a little pin in this for a moment and come right back. All right, we are back at it. Hold on a second. All right, here we are. We're back now. So what do we have in the glass for this one?
So this one...
This is Karl's pick.
This is my pick. This is our fresh hop Saison.
What? It's another Saison?
Another Saison.
Two Saisons in one episode.
What's going on here? This is one of my top beers that we have here. It ties in with the seasonality of Saison, being that it is a fresh hop Saison. It's, Sanquium. Jennifer picked that name. I will say that it's an Americanized version of the French word, but I don't have the nasal capacity for the actual pronunciation. It translates into fifth, and so we used it because I like to think of the hop harvest as the fifth season.
Ah, yes.
And also then makes this a Saison that is seasonal to the fresh hop harvest. It's all rustic malt, again, from Matt down at Rustic Farm, and it's just, I love it. It's all Ohio. No supply chain issues, because it's just a single link either direction.
Only weather issues.
Only just weather, yeah, Ohio weather. It's, but just delicious, and again with the Saisons, an element that I really like about this style is that it may change some over time, but it has a long shelf life of changing for the better before it starts to drop off.
Sure. Yeah.
Depending on where you like it in that time, you might think that it peaks early on. If you really like there's a herbal element, kind of tea-like to this hop that I feel kind of goes away and yields more to the grape. So if you like that, you better get it fresh, and then to you that's going to be the peak.
Yeah.
But when it goes away from your peak, it's just somebody else's peak coming on with Saisons.
Yeah, and it picks up something else. Like I said, now I get like a ton of white grape on the nose and on the palate. I mean, it's lovely. It's again, highly attenuated, as it should be. Nice and dry, beautifully bright.
It reminds me of a Chardonnay. A cold Chardonnay with no diacetyl.
That's what I always think. Like I tell people, Saison kind of can plug into that white wine space in the wine world. Saison kind of fits that bill. So if you're having, pairing wise, if you're eating fish, if you're
100%.
having chicken,
100%.
having something with a lot of garlic and lemon,
100%.
Saison just is fantastic pairing in the same way. And that's even like, I've cooked mussels in Saison. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Tell them about, make sure you tell them about Barn Talk and,
Mike. Silver Creek.
Silver Creek. Because that was your first experience with the hop harvest. Yeah.
Yeah, the first year of going to Hop Harvest was just out of this world. Going out to Barn Talk, and at that point we were just at Mike and Jenny's, and the hops were brought into us, and that alone was just the sight, the smell.
Yeah.
Sound not so much, but you get what you get when you're running machinery to pick the hop. But just great people too. Just such an experience to be out there and see that side of the agricultural element of what our industry is really about.
Gives you a new appreciation for where all these raw materials come from, for sure.
Absolutely. And then the following year, the second year we did this, we went out to Mike's place, and we got to actually watch him running his bucket down the line and cutting the vines and throwing them onto the truck, and then we got to follow him down the road, so we just got a little bit more of that slice. I think I'm happy to leave the rest of the farming to those guys.
For sure.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Bless those guys that are putting in the time and getting us our product so we can do what we like to do. And but yeah, just quite an experience to be there and see that product, and then to come back that afternoon. Jennifer's here in the brew house with the mash going, and then we're just throwing those.
Waiting.
Are
you
well,
on your way?
Second year she was waiting. We took a couple other coworkers out there to experience it, and we were all they were just loving it, and I couldn't drag them away.
It's too much. It's such an experience.
Yeah, it's hop harvest time, and that's I have a friend of mine that get fresh hops from. Same thing, like going out and been out to his place picking vines, in the early days, filling trash bags. Like, all right, we're gonna throw this in a cooler. I'm gonna get it into a beer tomorrow, and just getting that fun experience of being at the farm where you're picking them right off the vine. Throwing bags, you're like, this is going into a beer tomorrow. This is super fun.
Right.
Yeah. And getting all your, rashes and stickiness on your arms.
It's horrible.
It's really bad.
It's horrible.
Hand harvesting I don't recommend.
Yes, I don't recommend it either, but you need, long sleeves.
I've been growing them at home for a while. I actually got a start from Jennifer when she was down in Cincinnati.
And that's how I know. That's how I knew.
I've moved into a couple locations, so I'm a little acclimated to the wear and tear.
But the first time you're around them, you're just like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, you can feel it, but if it's like earth, then it's just everywhere, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
It just feels like you just got poison ivy immediately. It is an amazing plant, though.
It is.
It really
and
is.
It was great to go out there, and even the second year, I'm still a newbie. Like I said, I introduced Jennifer home brewing, but I was in construction until she dragged me in here on her coattails, and willingly. I shouldn't say dragged.
Sounds like you're being held hostage.
She offered. I hopped on.
All right, so we'll talk briefly. I know you guys use, sounds like you guys use a solid amount of rustic brew farm stuff. Is that like your kind of go-to for base malts?
That's my go-to is Pilsner from Rustic. And a lot of, we are so fortunate to be 2.7 miles away from LD.
Yeah.
So all of our specialty malts come from there. Matt now does Munich 10 and Vienna.
Yeah.
And wheat malt. So Hefeweizen is the other one that is pretty much all Ohio. So they're pretty much all Ohio, with the exception of hops. Because I'm still partial to Saaz, but it doesn't matter in a Hefeweizen too much.
Sure.
Because I don't really want a bunch of hops in the nose. But no, we're a huge supporter, and all of our Cascade is coming from Barn Talk.
Oh, nice.
Since we're not IPA brewers, our biggest beers that demand hops are our rye pale ale and Puffer Belly, which is our California Common, And even that's 35 IBUs, so it's like half of what you use in what you're usually using for an IPA. But I really like the fact that we can do... Revival is the other all Ohio. Actually, that's not true either, because it's Breeze, so there's some Northwest stuff.
Yeah.
Northwest stuff?
Northwest, Midwest.
Northwest, Midwest?
North, Midwest,
yeah.
Up there in the upper America, Canada region, around where they grow the grains.
The delivery from Rustic is 100% in my game plan to not have to travel to get malt, so that's really important too.
Yeah.
But yeah, as much as we can, it goes to Barn Talk and Rustic.
Let's talk a little bit about yeast selection, I guess, especially since we're dealing with Saisons. I guess what kind of what's your go-to for these beers? Are you a big like White Labs liquid yeast pitches, or are you? I'm unabashedly a dry yeast brewer.
Well, here's my deal. I mean, as a home brewer, I was reusing yeast up until it didn't taste good anymore, and then I'd be like, or it didn't smell good, it didn't taste good.
For sure.
It was extremely sensory. When I was at the first brewery, yeast was still not available in large quantities dry, or at least...
it's really changed over the years.
It has changed tremendously in the past 14 years.
Yes.
So I wasn't used to dry pitches. I had never pitched a brick of dry because we were using liquid. We were reusing, especially with the Hefeweizen, we would probably get 7 to 8 generations out of it because we were brewing... Now that... it doesn't matter who it was. We were reusing it 7 to 8 times. We manage about 5 to 6 yeasts, but because we're using Apex dry and some of these other dries are, like 1/6 the cost of what it used to be. So I feel like that gives me an edge where $50 is really nothing compared to $350.
Sure, yeah, that's why because when we started out at Maze, we were using those big liquid pitches from like White Labs and White Yeast. And
you can. Thank you.
And the price astronomical. You're just like, holy smokes. So then you felt like I have to do everything I can to get as many batches as I can out of the strain. And so it kind of would like kneecap you a little bit, where you're like, I can't move along from this because I need to be able to like make this economical. Because when you're paying $350 for a pitch of yeast, you're trying to reuse that because that's a giant chunk of your budget on that beer now.
I feel like I am not inhibited at all by the cost of a fresh liquid pitch. I frequently buy my California common yeast because it's in 4 to 5 beers, depending on what I have on tap. So all of my American lagers come from that California common strain, San Francisco lager. I try to keep that going as long as I can, but I also manage 6 lagers on tap, so it's not always feasible to. I can manage it, but I don't have a propagator. I don't have a Brinks. I don't have all the fancy storage things. But also as a home brewer, I take great pride in the fact that I know how to propagate yeast.
Yes.
I know how to take care of yeast. I know what can kill it and what can't kill it. And so when I can grow up my own pitch with the rudimentary equipment that I have, and it's successful, it gives me a great sense of pride and accomplishment. So we still do that every once in a while. We'll do it again. Wednesday we'll brew up our Pilsner again, and I'll start up a Mexican lager strain that I have 15 little smack packs for. And so by the time we're ready to brew, the Monday after next week, then we're ready to go. It should be it should be freaking great.
Excellent. So we touched on hops already a bit here. Another nerdy thing that I get into with brewers, for your lagers, are you guys spunding at all? Are you doing
Well, we do
natural
old school spending,
capture,
so I don't have the fancy little.
You're just capping the tank. Or,
Yep.
Yeah,
and that's something that you can't figure that out as a home brewer, and you can hear other professional brewers talk about it until you actually are in a brewery where you can do it and you can see the benefits of it.
Sure.
That it doesn't make any sense to you.
Yes.
So that is something that Andy taught me at Market Garden that I will always carry with me. It's super easy. It makes so much sense.
Yes.
I feel like the yeast by that time is pretty much, you're not hurting it.
No.
It's doing what it wants to do. I love the idea of capping. I have a triple in there that is very, very slow.
Would love to cap.
I would. I capped it today, but it was just like, I'm not ready to cap you because I don't want to come in and have my PRV going.
Right.
Like that's a little bit frightening.
And that's how I feel like you got to be like pretty on the ball when you're doing that, especially if you're not using a spunding valve, because now you're relying on your PRV to keep things in check if you're not around when it's spiking. But
you're relying on the fact that your consistency is consistent.
Yeah.
And so I capped it last time at 4, and so it's going to finish at 2.5. And that's exactly where I want it to be. I want it to be, I want to have 1.5 points left so that I can actually raise the pressure and get it to where it needs to be. And for the most part, we've been very successful. The reason I love the idea of spunding is not only because I think the natural carbonation, I think that there is a difference in the mouthfeel.
Yeah.
But it also, it takes a long time. I read this stuff on these other brewers forums that I love to read through, and they're not doing any kind of capping or spunding, and the amount of CO2 that they're using to get their 20 barrels up to a proper packaging PSI is just crazy to me.
Right.
Like, what do you mean you left it on overnight? Do you know if you cap it,
Right.
Like it'll be at 10. It'll be at 10.
Yeah.
You only need to go. You only need to go to 12.5 now, guy.
And about the same amount of time it'll be carved where you want it to be anyhow.
Yeah,
and you didn't have to put any into it.
So now, I mean, we're at the point that when it's capped properly, by the time that we either put it in the bright tank or put it in the lager tanks, we put it on the stone to get it up to 15.
Right.
And let it go for 48 hours, it'll drop. So last week when we transferred our lager into the serving tank, we did the same thing that we did to our other lagers. Now it's at 10. So tomorrow it'll go on the stone until it gets up to 15. And god damn it, wouldn't you know that when we check that PSI, it's going to be where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Not PSI. CO2 volume will be where it needs to be for that style.
Right.
It's very, very easy. I'm surprised that... Well, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I think that a lot of it's a note for the experienced brewer to pass down to their friends that you can actually do this much easier than what you're killing yourself doing.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, it's so nice. Having an already carved beer, and you're just finishing it off in the bright tank to get just to the rest of the conditioned phase that you want it to be, and you're not the only thing that you're doing is just holding that head pressure on there, and that's it. You don't have to worry about anything else, and then you didn't blow through a bunch of extra CO2 that you didn't need to. It was a little late to the game getting to the spunding.
Well, and I don't really understand the scientific value behind it. Like, I don't understand why it works like that. But I do find that if I do that, then I am getting a clearer beer quicker.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just because I have horizontal capacity.
Right.
I think that I think spunding actually, when the beer's done.
Well, I think what's happening is you're giving the yeast a little extra time to do their cleanup work.
Right.
Normally, you would be, starting to chill it down a lot faster and that sort of thing. If you're getting towards the end of fermentation and you're leaving it a little warm to finish de-rest and carb up, and you're capping it there, that yeast is just getting a little more time in the beer to do its cleanup crew action and kind of absorb, a lot of the off stuff that otherwise might have remained when you
So
start chilling too early.
how are you starting your conditioning for your cold condition for your lagers? Are you crashing, or are you doing a degree a day or 2 degrees a day?
I do a slow cooling. Most of my lager beers, they're cooling. I usually set those for around 120 hours or so to get from, where they're ending at D-rest at, let's say like 62, 63 degrees by the time that's finishing up. And then chilling down to 35, I set that value usually around like 120 hours, and it'll step down, gradually over that time. And that's, I think, the function of that when you're crashing immediately, like, you're not giving the yeast enough time to clean up what it needs to, and so a lot of that is kind of staying in suspension more than it should. When you give it that gradual kind of step down, it seems like whatever they're doing in there, it's getting them to fall out and flock a little nicer, and you end up with a cleaner, beer by the time that happens when you're gradually stepping it down. Ales, I step those also a little bit quicker. Usually those are, 72 to 96 hours.
I stop stepping.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
I step if I don't have time.
Right.
So, like, the ESB got stepped because I was unsure if I wanted to save the yeast.
Sure.
But it was $50, so I'm
Well,
like,
yeah.
I can't brew. I can't brew you for another 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a little
I'll
bit.
spend
too,
another $50.
Yep. 3 weeks is too long for me to think about a corny keg of yeast in my cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of ESB, have you used London in anything? Because the way that stuff flocks is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. I really love 1056. I really love
Sure.
like the standard American ale. But I mean, we took that from when did we brew that? May 9th, so 2 weeks ago, and then I took it to 50 on Friday. Today I transferred it to the bright tank, and it's already clear.
Yeah, and that's like
It's already clear. Throw 5 ounces of biofine, it'll be fucking clear by Friday. Like, it's unbelievable.
SO4,
that yeast.
which is what I usually use for English style, especially in like our lock stock, the stock ale we do. It's super flocking, going down in there, makes some really interesting beer turds when you're dropping out of the dump valve.
Yes.
And so it is super flocker. And always fun to see the English ale.
Super flocker.
Yeast turds.
That's a good name for it.
Mother flocker.
Mother flocker.
Yeah, that's
well,
pretty
so
good.
I teach a couple of beer classes, and so I have a regular now that comes in, and she remembers all the cool words.
Yeah.
So she was just in here on Friday, and so she reminded us that she could actually use attenuate and flocculate, and what was the other word that she used? It's just impressive when you know what those words mean, and you can use them in a meaningful sentence. It's very validating. Yeah. Because I mean, flocculation is such a sexy word. Attenuation is just like.
No one knows what flocculation is outside of breweries or water treatment plants.
Right, exactly. Right.
Those are the two professions. People that work in those fields, they know what you're talking about. You tell it to anyone else, and their eyes glaze over.
They're like, "What are you talking about?
Why are you just making up words now?
Why are you saying that in front of my daughter?" Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So we're moving along here. We're going to get away from, necessarily any kind of technical questions. We'll ask both of you. Do you have any hobbies now outside of beer since you've gone pro? Because like all of us, mainly our hobby was beer before we got into doing this.
Let me just tell you about my dilemma. So what I discovered last year, and it was extremely depressing when I discovered or realized that I didn't have a social life because NeoPro was no longer.
Yeah.
My friend that I like to drink with is now working in the brewery. I don't necessarily want to hang out with him after we work together all day, which is not fair.
No, it's not fair, but that's.
But I was also in a different mind space.
Yeah. Traditionally, how I've been, I work with people, and I'm like, sorry, I've seen you enough. Like, I love you.
I need to be away from you.
Gotta go. But I was also too tired to set my taps
I realized the first year here that I was missing my homebrew days. And I'll tell Karl, I really miss homebrewing. But what I miss is the social part. I miss serving my beer. I don't get to serve my beer here. I'm not a bartender.
Yeah.
I'm the brewer. And it's unfortunate because I can't then express how passionate I am about my product to the person across the bar. Like it's the person next to me at the bar. And that's not always a good thing.
Yeah.
I'd rather be on the other side.
Right.
And I realized that now I also don't have a hobby. I also don't have a way to spend my free time because my free time was inviting my friends over to have beer with me in the driveway. And guess what? It wasn't judging beer. It was just actually enjoying beer.
Yeah.
Exactly what I set this place up to do, the philosophy behind it. I mean, we're in the original gathering space, which if it wasn't a tavern, it's a fucking church, right? Sorry, Mom. But that's what it is, and here I am, and I can't do all of these things. So do I have a hobby? No. And it's making me a little bit crazy, but I'm in the process of replacing my lines in my beer fridge, so I might actually be able to have people over and be like, yeah, so let's just get together and have a beer.
Yeah.
Like my friend across the street, his name is Light Lager Jerry. He drinks Coors Light, and we became great friends during COVID because I was homebrewing, constantly brewing beer, constantly. But I also had constant people over because it was a safe space and there was space, so you could get together and talk and have beer.
And there was really good beer.
And it was good beer. Thank you, Karl. But it also reminded me, like, when I saw him last week, he goes, so, are we going to play cornhole this year or what? Like, are you going to do your taps or what? And it's like, he was saying it like, it's not just because it's free beer.
Yeah.
It's because
community.
He missed that part of it, and that's what I miss too.
Yeah.
So that part of it has been really difficult for me, actually. And I miss hiking, but at the end of my day, I am so tired. I've had some feet issues. I've had other physical ailments that have disallowed me from doing the things that I enjoy doing. And that's when I discovered rafting. And so I'm a big rafter these days.
One. Yeah.
I'm talking about lazy river rafting.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It's
tubing.
It's
absolutely
tubing. Oh, tubing. Okay. I like lazy.
Let's be clear.
I like lazy river rafting. That sounds better.
I like floating down a river.
Yeah, that's my hobby.
Which is a terrific pastime.
My hobby is floating down the river and seeking out Tedeschi truck shows within my reach.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yep. Thank you.
That's I said I started, cooking. Well, I mean, I've been cooking for years, but it's like that's my hobby now outside of brewing because for a long time it was just like,
everybody's wondering when the restaurant's opening.
Never. This one I'm keeping for myself. Every once in a while I invite people over. Hey, you want to come have dinner? That's as far as it's ever going to go.
Me and Karl are bailed for pizza.
Or
for whatever.
Yeah, I'll certainly come down. No, because, I always say, ruined one good hobby, I'm not doing it again. And also, I do not envy people that work in restaurants. And that is not something I want to introduce to myself if I can help it. Obviously, if anything ever went tits up at the brewery and I had to find something else to do, I'm sure I could start a food truck and make some money.
Yeah.
But that's not anything I want to get into.
But I think it's a really interesting problem for home brewers that, your friends, my friends really want me to open a brewery. My beer is so good. First of all, it's probably true for 25% of those people that, because their friends, are your friends paying for your beer? Probably not.
No.
So is it good beer? Well, I mean, I drank J.P. Rupert's. Isn't that what it was called? It was not good beer. It was $2 for 6 beers. But I drank it because I wanted the effect. Just because you can brew beer doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And I think that happened to a lot of people in the 90s. There was a lot of brewers that opened and they subsequently closed because the beer wasn't good. And then we saw this interesting time frame of 10 to 15 years where certain breweries, certain areas, Vermont was starting to boom, Colorado was booming, San Francisco, Seattle, Like you had these little pockets of really good beer popping up, and then he's doing it, so why can't I? And so, like how we started this podcast, like look at the state of the industry today is not the same that it was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Or even when we were drinking beer. I mean, we're in the same generation, so we were drinking in 1980. What were we drinking in 1990? Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
Bass was still in the market.
Oh yeah, Bass.
We actually really weren't drinking. I wasn't really drinking Sierra Nevada until it was on my radar that there's something poppier than Bass Ale. Right. Okay, I can't drink Bass Ale today.
Yeah.
It's just I will probably drink it when I go to England, but I can't.
If I'm popping into a Irish dive bar somewhere and they've got Bass Ale on tap, I'm gonna drink Bass Ale. Like, And not only am I gonna drink it, but I'm gonna sit there and wax poetic about how much I loved it. 20 years ago, and I'm like, this was amazing. It still tastes all right.
Do you have Guinness too?
Yeah. And I will sit there and drink those beers and not complain one bit, and I'll be happy as shit to do it.
Yeah.
And that's,
if the lines are clean, though.
Well, that's the big difference. Yeah, I mean, if you're going into a place that's got shitty dirty lines, you shouldn't be drinking there anyways. Yeah. But, I mean, I'm never sad about drinking those nostalgic beers still. I still, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is still a constant at my house. Standard. Just, if I'm not drinking a keg of something I took home or, beer from friends.
To me, that green label is one of those things like you go to a party and there's a backyard thing. And they're like, you get some, go ahead and find yourself a beer back there. And you walk in and all you see is like white cans. And you're like, White Claw. And all of a sudden you see the green label and you're like,
Which, by the way, they can never change that label. It has to be that label till the end of time.
But didn't they upgrade it a little bit a couple years ago? And it was like, the first time you saw it, you were like,
I don't know if it was that, but Torpedo now is weird. Like, they refreshed the Torpedo cans and bottle labels, and now it's like, I walk in a store and I'm like, that doesn't look like it should.
Yeah.
Why is it that way now?
Yeah.
But, like, still, the Sierra Nevada cans are the same as they've been for, I don't know, since
forever.
I can remember, yeah.
And you still get a kick out of every winter, right around Thanksgiving when Celebration comes out. And somebody says, I don't really want an IPA with spices. And you're like, that's fine. It's more for me.
Yeah. Right, yeah. You can't have any anyway.
You wouldn't like this
spices,
one.
Dummy.
You wouldn't like it. You can buy me one.
You wouldn't like it. This is Christmas IPA. Yeah, and that's...
That beer pisses me off the older I get because I hate caramel malt so much in IPAs, but I love that beer so much. I don't.
Whatever the balance they've struck
I don't
with
know.
That beer,
I don't know how they do
it's
it.
Straight magic.
If they told me it was C60, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, I don't know what's in there. I don't care.
I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
It's whatever magic they've imparted into that.
The only 60 you find back in my brewery is Cara Munich, which I love.
I'm gonna buy it every year that
every
it
year.
comes out.
Every year
it comes out, I'm gonna get it. I've been super bummed the past couple of years because like Bigfoot barley wine hasn't made its way down to where I'm at, and I haven't seen it around in a couple of years, and so I'm like, I used to love Bigfoot barley wine, and I would get it every year, and now I see it nowhere, and it's really bumming me out. And I think it's because nobody buys barley wine anymore.
It's true.
A whole other ball of wax. Yeah. All right, so moving away from the hobbies.
Okay.
Barley wine goes really well with this sink.
Which I forgot to ask Karl. Karl, do you have any hobbies outside of here that you enjoy?
Well, I kind of flipped the switch because homebrewing was my hobby from the early 90s, like I said, and I always made my money in labor. I was a house painter, worked for a cabinet maker, and got into kind of general remodeling, home maintenance, repair.
Yeah.
And since I started working in here, I have not brewed a single batch of beer at home, but things get fixed.
So that's
kind of my hobby now, is working on the house. And then I do have a bit of a hobby in here. It is sad, as Jennifer said, she doesn't get to work the bar, but I do tend the bar for our Friday lunch. So I have picked up preaching the gospel of Jennifer here.
There it is.
Bell
Yes,
Tower.
It's my little apostle.
Engaging with our customers
Beer
and
apostle
talking
Karl.
beer. And
It's freaking great.
I love when our
Fantastic.
when our
We have a
amazing,
really good team.
Amazing Grace isn't on tap. Our American Light Lager. When somebody comes in and tells me they usually drink, Budweiser or Bud Light or Coors Light, whatever their American style is. I do like to sneak these Saisons into the, let me suggest this to you.
That guy, yeah.
And I it's about
I'm your pusher,
50-50.
man.
I do get some people that bite on it, and then some of them become fans, and so it's nice being able to have that opportunity, and that is a bit of my hobby now, is
Fantastic.
tending bar once a week and having fun.
Did you ever have any other career in mind outside of this? Was there ever anything that you were like, I really want to do this for a living?
Yes, my plan A was to be a mom. I wanted to teach my kids how to garden. That's all I could think about for forever and ever. And then when homebrewing was my hobby, no, I didn't actually think that I was going to get a career in beer. Somebody told me once that they asked me once when I was going to make my mark, and didn't really hit me at that time. But when I moved back to Kent from Cincinnati, it struck me that, well, I could probably do this because, well, I guess I don't really have any girls to call. Like, how did you get a job in beer? Because there weren't any girls in beer.
Right.
But I figured it out. When I was a girl, I wanted to be a teacher. I'm educating now. I like my educational part of my job here, to teach people what I think they should know or what I think is interesting about beer. So I like to use that as my avenue to express my personality.
Yeah.
And to let people into a really very exciting world of beer. I really get super excited and interested in people's opinions about beer, what they're experiencing, especially as newcomers. I think that's all really very exciting because I can remember what it was like, but I was also 30 years old. So, I got into beer very late in life, but nope, didn't want to do it. No, I had no career plans. I studied philosophy. I don't know what I was going to do with that. I think it makes me a better human. I also studied psychology, so I really like understanding where people are coming from. And I studied religion. So those three things together, working in a place where I'm brewing to be served in a sacred space, all seems to be, I don't know, serendipitous at best.
Yeah. I definitely had other career plans. Even, watching Jennifer through her, professional career development, I was blindsided by the opportunity to come and work with her. I went up to Vermont to study veterinary medicine, and that didn't really pan out. And then I, fell into labor and trades. I never expected to be doing what I'm doing, so I obviously had other career plans.
It's a wild ride a lot of the time. And that's, this brewing kind of came to me in the same way. It was weird. I was a very, much more serious person in my 20s than I am today. Coming out of the military and then being a fireman during that time, I was very, very much a serious fellow back in those days. And then I got into brewing beer, and it went crazy. And then I got out of firefighting and just made beer and became way less serious after that. Probably thank our Uncle Herb for some of that change in attitude. That's a
I didn't realize
story from another time.
I didn't realize we had the same uncle. Okay.
We don't have the same uncle. That's strange. That's crazy.
We are family.
So, and this is kind of the last thing I like to end on. Lemmy from Motorhead famously said, he was asked, what they were bringing to heavy music. And his response was nothing. We've brought nothing to heavy music. What we've done is taken away. We took away the pretentious musicianship, the outlandish outfits, and what we brought was real and true. What do you think that you've brought to craft brewing, or what do you hope to bring to craft brewing?
Well, I'm not much of a Motorhead fan.
I get it.
But I am an Allman Brothers fan. And, you know, there's this very simple line in one of the most beautiful songs that was ever written that talks about walking along the river. And if I chose to, I could walk down the river and come to the place where I spend the majority of my work week. In a place that was built to worship. I get to spend the time in a cemented floor with a friend that I've had for 38 years. I get to watch people come and work and love their job and talk about stories and create friendships. I'm not a huge part of that whole scene in front of house because they are very young. And I'm tired at the end of the day. But there is something very significant about who you are and what you can bleed into what you do. There's so much talk about passion, do what you love and you'll never die, or all this freaking passion talk kind of makes me a little bit crazy sometimes because my passion got lost. It's been lost before, it's been lost again, even in this industry where I get disgruntled and I'm frustrated and I'm misunderstood and I lose sight of what gives me joy and what I should be grateful for. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of music out there that also reminds me you can walk along the river. That is what keeps me breathing every day, is that I am given the opportunity. I gave myself the opportunity to do something that I love to do, and the way that I can share it is my own. I don't have anybody telling me how I can do that, when I can do that, how I should do that, for the most part. That was not the question. But I do.
That's
but
what
I.
you're bringing to beer.
Yeah, that is. I mean, it's me. This beer is me. Everything on that list is me. Everything on that board, I can tell you about the style. I can tell you about the history. I can tell you about why it's represented. And I think that's a personal part of a brewer's story that makes it relevant. It's what's going to carry Bell Tower into the next year of business. I really believe that. I think that if you ask anybody in the kitchen, they're going to give you the same kind of answer. If you ask any one of my managers, they're going to say something about what this place does to the Kent community and their relationships with the other people around them. But for me, I do have a particular relationship with beer. I think that it's an important story to tell, not only beer in general, but my individual relationship with every single one of these beers on tap. I'm extremely proud of the relationship that I have with my yeast.
It's a very important relationship. Karl, to you.
Well, to start, I mean that's a great question. I haven't really thought about it much.
Cheers, guys.
What am I looking to bring to beer? But now thinking about it and listening to Jennifer, and really what I want to bring to beer is Jennifer's beer. I say, half jokingly at beer events, conferences, and whatnot.
He says it all the time.
What people ask me what I do, and I say I do what I'm told, and I do it, but I do it proudly. I do it with joy and gratitude. I learn every day from Jennifer in professional capacity. To have people in this industry, which is such a social and communal and joyous community, but is, like a lot of our culture, it's male dominated. And to have people come up to me and ask me how I do something or what I do or how I do, and I said, you need to ask Jennifer.
Yeah.
Like that I love being an advocate of this beer. I've enjoyed it for decades.
Yeah.
I take great pride in being able to say that I introduced her to homebrewing, although it was her desire and her passion that brought her into it and took her beyond it and way beyond what I could have done, or will do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I want to bring to beers. I want to.
And that's
I want to bring Jennifer's beer. I want to support this. I want to talk about.
Thanks for making me cry, Karl.
Beer flavored beers, the variety, what you can do with these beers, and why there shouldn't be a pigeonhole that we should all be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That we should embrace the variety, the diversity, all the different styles, flavors, colors, everything that you can get out of these ingredients and the people that we're around, and to bring that community, to let beer be something that is social and acceptable, and something that we don't need to bastardize or go over the top or overconsume for that, and sure, there's occasion where we do, and you do, and you must, but, to like really enjoy and appreciate the company of people. And I think that's an old world thing, traveling to Scotland and seeing their gravities are so much lower, and the pub is all about coming out to
it's a social event,
community and to talk and to engage with people. That I'm not a digital guy. The only way you're going to find me on social media is the Bell Tower webpage. And people tell me things that I didn't even know existed. Yes, I'm like, but that's what I love, and that's so that's what I'm looking to bring to beer
for sure. Excellent.
You're awesome, Karl.
Excellent.
What has been given.
As someone with daughters, it's one of those things where
Yes.
I want them to strive for the moon. I want them to understand that anything for them is as possible as it is for anybody else.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want I love to be able to point to people like Jennifer and say, if you have a passion, if you have something that you love to do, don't ever let anybody tell you that you're incapable of it, or that you don't have a space here or anything else. And I think the industry is really moving in the right direction here.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
It is worlds of difference from where it was, 10 years ago.
Yep.
And, I love to see it. Love to see it. I always am like, hey, if you've got a passion for something, you're good at it, and you can pull it off, everybody should be welcome to be in that space. And, even coming from a military background where, I got, guys, I was in an infantry unit, so it was a very, at that time, was still all men. There were no women involved, and they started bringing women into infantry school and into these units. And I remember seeing people complain and stuff, and I remember just saying to guys I was with, or whatever, hey, listen, this should not be segmented in this way. If you've got a capable and willing person that's able to do this job or any job they set eye to, they should have that opportunity to do it. And that is how things absolutely should be. I don't I always get incensed when people
I still don't
try
quite
to pigeonhole others
I still
based
don't
on
quite
parameters
get it.
that seem very arbitrary to me. But So I don't know.
Discussion for a whole different time.
Yeah, that's a whole other ball of wax.
I would love to talk about women in high high industry positions,
Yeah.
like pre-1970. Like, it's
Right.
so fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is.
It's
highly
fascinating. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but at this point,
Hey.
we're gonna bring this to an end.
All
'Cause
right.
we've been going on for
I know.
quite a while.
I know.
Some editing to do.
And,
Nobody's going to listen
no, I
to
got
all
like one
this.
thing that.
Hey, if you listen to this whole thing, I'll gift you a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk to me about
Been a
this.
pleasure, Jake.
I've been so glad to be here. The beer's
Yay.
delicious as
Thank
always. And cheers.
Cheers. Thank
Cheers.
So
you,
good to
Jake.
see you guys. And I'll do another podcast eventually for
All
the
right.
rest of you. See ya.
See ya.